Hey guys, on this episode of the Quickie, we're going to learn how to put in a hammer, trigger, and disconnector. Okay, so the main thing to remember when you're installing your hammer and your trigger and your disconnector is making sure that your springs are on correctly. So to do that, I'm going to show you how. This is your hammer spring and your hammer. You want to make sure that it's oriented to where when the hammer is cocked, it loads the spring. And that looks like that. When you're cocking the hammer, you're loading the spring. Don't be afraid to bend the spring a little as you put it on. That is okay. For the trigger, you're going to want it on. Make sure that you have the 90-degree bend here underneath the hook in the trigger, in this part. And that is how you put the trigger spring on. The last spring you're going to put in is your disconnector spring. Now make sure that when you have your disconnector spring, you don't grab your bolt catch spring by accident. They look very similar. The difference is your disconnector spring is tapered. So it will sit down in this round part, this channel in the back of your trigger. You want to put it in at an angle and kind of twist it in and then push it down like so. Now your disconnector is going to sit right on top of that spring. The hook is going to sit right over it, and the hole is going to line up with the hole in the trigger. So when you put it in, it's going to go just like that. So what you're going to do is put that in. You're going to drop it into the lower receiver. Disconnector is going to go just like I showed you, right on top of it. Now to get the pin through, you're going to have to wiggle the disconnector just a little bit, but you line up that hole. Nice and easy, just like that. Your pin's going to go through. Your hammer and trigger pin are the same. Doesn't matter which direction they go through, which side the cuts are on. And sometimes it's easier than others. You're just going to have to wiggle it until it goes through. There we go. Then you're going to wiggle your disconnector. You just move it around with your thumb until the pin goes all the way through. Now with your hammer, like I said, you want to load that spring. So the legs of the hammer spring are going to sit on the trigger pin, just like that. The leg of that hammer spring is going to sit in the groove on the side here, and that's what keeps your trigger pin from walking out. Now in the center, you see you've got a groove here. There's a J-spring inside your hammer that keeps that from walking out. So you're actually going to load the hammer. You just cock it back, and you can actually, it'll sit a little bit on the disconnector. You just try and get it lined up. And then you just push it through, line it up on the other side, just like that. Now your selector's in, so you're going to do your function check. With it on safe, keep your hand over the trigger, or over the hammer. Pull that trigger, nothing happens. That means your selector works. Now let's put it on fire. Pull the trigger a couple times. That means it's good to go. Now the reason we put the hand over the hammer is so that it doesn't fall forward and hit that bolt catch. And that'll shatter your bolt catch, so we don't want to do that. The last thing you want to do is function test your disconnector. To do that, you're going to push all the way down on your hammer. Pull the trigger while holding the hammer. Let go of the hammer. And then when you let go of the trigger, you should hear a distinct pop and the hammer will drop up just a little bit. Just like that. And that's what makes sure your disconnector is doing its job. So I do that a couple times, pull the trigger a couple times, and that is how you install your hammer, trigger, and disconnector.